Hi there, welcome to another episode of Israel Explained. We're going to talk about the assassinations of, most of all, Ismail Haniyeh, but also senior officials from the IRGC, from Hezbollah, creating a sense, when you add it on top of the assassination of Muhammad Deif, that Israel is going for the jugular by killing the most senior members of all the Iranian proxies, including Ismail Haniyeh on Iranian territory. So what does this all mean? What are the repercussions? There's a few questions that everyone keeps asking. One is, how will it affect the hostage deal? The other is, will it lead to wider regional war? And I'll answer both those questions. But one thing that has to be said first is, let's talk about what this means regarding Israeli capabilities. Already when the Mohammed Deif assassination occurred, and also when the rescue of a few hostages occurred, it had become clear that Israeli intelligence capabilities in Gaza, but also everywhere else in the Middle East, had improved markedly since October 7th. And the reason for that is reliance. And I say reliance because going back to basics on human intelligence instead of signal intelligence, and more of a bottom up approach to intelligence than top down, less relying on conceptions and assumptions, and more relying on raw data as it's coming in. Both very important conclusions, and to the credit of the Israeli military intelligence and the Mossad, things that they've put into process quickly, and now we're seeing the results. There's also no question that these assassinations restore, not completely, but a certain amount of Israeli deterrence, which had become almost non-existent um, after all the missiles that had been fired at the north with no adequate Israeli response. So that's the first thing to know. Everyone talks about stability, peace agreement. In the Middle East, one of the most important things is to show that you're strong, to show that you have capabilities, to show that no one can mess with you. And Israel has certainly done that. The killing of Haniyeh, Ismail Haniyeh, in Tehran, while he was under the personal protection of the Iranian Guard, is one of the greatest coups in Mossad history. It's one of the most ambitious and successful assassination attempts that I can think of. It was so surprisingly well done that when I first heard the news, I thought it was definitely fake news. There's no way that this happened, but it did. And it shows a marked rise in Israeli capabilities. But now let's get to the questions that everyone's wondering about. One is, will the assassination of Haniyeh in particular, but the other ones as well, end hostage talks? Will they derail the hostage talks that everyone's talking about? This morning I was watching CNN, always a mistake, and they said that this was going to derail a very promising hostage talk process. But of course, those of you who watch this channel, those of you who follow the Middle East closely, know that there is no promising hostage talk process. It's true that there were meetings in Rome just a few days ago, but once Netanyahu changed the terms of his offer to include holding on to Philadelphia, to include checking four armed militants moving from the south to the north, a list of the hostages, and a veto of prisoners. Those are the four things that I've heard bandied about. Hamas was going to say no to that offer, at least as it stands. Um, so there is no process that's going anywhere. What Israel's basically doing right now is it's trying to pressure Hamas into accepting these new terms. That's assuming that Israel would accept the terms if Hamas accepts them. There's some differences of opinion about that. There's a question of whether Netanyahu is trying to get better terms for a hostage deal, or if he doesn't want a hostage deal at all. Everyone has their own interpretation, but that's something that we don't know. But what's for sure is he doesn't want to agree to terms that Hamas wants to agree to. Now, it has to be said that there's logic to what Netanyahu is doing if he's trying to get better terms. Because the terms that he proposed in May, the ones that were shown publicly by Biden in early June, reflected a certain place in time. They reflected a time when Sinwar and Hamas were in the driver's seat, or at least thought they were in the driver's seat, because public opinion had turned so rapidly against Israel, and Israel didn't seem to be achieving anything on the battlefield. Since then, two things have changed. One, because of American electoral issues and other global issues, no one is really talking about Gaza. It's true that you still see it on the news, but it doesn't actually feel like anyone cares. The Israelis don't feel much pressure from anyone. The American administration, the Biden administration, is lame duck, and no one else seems all that invested. So that's something that's changed. Also, Israel's military operation in Gaza has changed markedly. About 2 or 3 months ago, and this goes along with what I said about intelligence, the Israeli general staff came to a understanding that there was going to be no day after. There was going to be no replacing Hamas, at least not anytime soon. So instead of the old method that they had of destroying Hamas brigade by brigade, they've come to an understanding that the best thing they can do is strike Hamas as hard as possible when they're not expecting, in their moments of weakness. So they'll wait till there's gatherings, crap everyone, kill everyone, arrest everyone, do targeted assassinations against high value targets, wait till there's rich information, and go in and take out headquarters, take out tunnels. So you wait until there's an important target and take it out instead of fighting against every single little Hamas member who doesn't matter. That's been showing some great results, along with the public relations thing where no one cares. Israel's doing much better on the battlefield. Hamas is not near being destroyed, but Hamas is feeling so much pain every day. And that's why they're talking. And so the people who talk about a hostage deal that was promising falling apart are missing two things. One, the talks were going nowhere. Two, Hamas doesn't have an alternative but to talk. People keep saying, are they going to walk away from the table? They might walk away from the table for a few days. They have nowhere else to go. If they want to stop the amount of damage that the IDF is doing to them, they have to come back. So they can't stop the talks because all they have is the talks and the hostages. That's the only leverage that they have. So talks are going to continue, and possibly Israel will be able to get a better stand and more leverage at the negotiating table. Of course, that comes with a major price. Every delay makes it less likely that the hostages come out alive. And that seems to be a chance that Netanyahu is willing to take, um, despite the fact that there's going to be a major price to pay if he doesn't get the hostages out. There's also going to be a major price to pay if he doesn't destroy Hamas. And it looks pretty clear which price he'd prefer to pay. Another thing that everyone keeps asking is, will this lead to a regional war? And again, this is built on false assumptions. There already is a wide regional war. Israel is battling proxies in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, and is even killing people in Iran and exchanging the occasional flurry of rockets with Iran. This is as much of a wide regional conflict as it can be. And another thing that's being ignored is that there's a reason Iran hasn't escalated more than it's escalated so far, because it's already using most of its capabilities against Israel. Hezbollah is shooting at Israel every day. The Houthis are shooting at Israel. Hamas no longer can. They're trying to make the West Bank destabilize, so far with partial success. Militias are shooting. There's a few things they haven't done, but there's a reason they haven't done them. One is make Hezbollah go into a complete campaign against Israel that would force Israel to invade. The reason they're not doing that is because that would have serious repercussions politically for Hezbollah in Lebanon. Most of the Lebanese people do not want that, and that would weaken their abilities there. The other is to start fighting Israel directly from Iran. But as we saw when they tried to exchange missiles with Israel, they really can't do all that much damage to Israel, and Israel can do more damage to them. If they escalate, they might do more damage, but Israel will be able to to hit them back. And the United States has said that they'll back Israel again. So there's really not any good place for Iran to escalate to, and it's already a regional war. So we're looking at this from the wrong perspective. Now, some interesting things that I've noticed about the Haniyeh assassination is that people don't seem to be as upset as you would expect. In Gaza, there's really no mourning at all. Rumors are that Sinwar is not upset at all. Him and Haniyeh did not get along. It always seemed that when Haniyeh wanted a deal, Sinwar didn't. When Sinwar wanted a deal, Haniyeh didn't. The Iranians haven't allowed him to have a funeral, haven't allowed Haniyeh to have a funeral on their territory. He's going back to Qatar for that. Um, and that might show some strained relations between Hamas and Iran. It certainly shows that Haniyeh wasn't all that popular, even though he was invited. And so there are this infighting, and the Israeli intelligence and their ability to put moles in all these areas, and possibly Iranian opposition groups, are increasing a paranoia and a sense of disintegration there. Hamas is very much weakened by this. Of course, they will replace Haniyeh probably with Khalid Mashal. There's some other candidates I've heard of, but this, along with all the devastation Israel's caused Hamas in the last few months, really weaken the organization. Meanwhile, Iran is feeling stunned and vulnerable, and that's another thing they're thinking of if they escalate, is that Israel has shown the ability to hit them inside the country, both last time they shot at Israel and now, and in the past with things like Stuxnet and assassination of nuclear um, engineers, and so on and so forth. This really feels like it could be a turning point in the war if Israel keeps pressing. Israel's had a tendency after things like this to stand back and say that now they're waiting for Hezbollah. And they even said that, the ball's in Hezbollah's court. But then Israel killed Haniyeh, so Israel's playing all sorts of games, being more aggressive than it has been before. That works. It's working. Of course, it needs to come with a kind of game plan how to translate that into political gains, which is something that Israel's not good at. But it's putting Hamas on the defensive. It's putting Hezbollah on the defensive. It's making Iran feel vulnerable. It's working. So you're going to hear a lot of military experts, diplomatic experts say that these operations are meaningless, that they'll all be replaced, that it just risks escalation. It's not true. It's a complex game. And Hamas had the upper hand, and now Hamas no longer have the upper hand. And that is very important and very valuable. So what happens now? Israel's expecting a retaliation. The NYT had a report that Khamenei, their great leader, has ordered a direct assault from Iran on Israel. When that'll happen? Well, Israel so far hasn't ordered the civilians to prepare for an imminent attack. That's probably because they know from experience that Iran usually waits. They have a tendency to try to torture Israelis with threats and see how nervous they get and enjoy it. I don't think they're going to see that this time like they did last time. Israelis have already seen Iran try to hit it. They were not very impressed with the results. I don't sense that there's a lot of nervousness in Israel about it. Of course, things might be different this time, but there isn't a lot of concern. Now, there's different options for the response. Just because they shot a bunch of missiles and rockets and drones the last time doesn't mean they'll do it again. If they do it again, they'll do more, because last time what they did wasn't enough. Other things that they might do include attempts to assassinate senior Israeli officials, IDF and civilian alike. That would be a sort of symmetrical response to what happened to Haniyeh. Iran was involved in the assassination of Rehavam Ze'evi, the minister known by his nickname Gandhi, many years ago. They might try that again. Then they also might try a massive cyber attack. It's unclear how badly Iran could hurt Israel in cyber on its own. It probably could do some damage. If it could get the Russians to cooperate, it could do even more damage. But none of those things would likely be a game changer. They would just harm Israel, and they wouldn't necessarily remove the upper hand that it's gained through these assassinations. And that will be interesting to see. So overall, these assassinations have improved Israel's bargaining position. I don't believe they'll lead to an escalation that can't be controlled. But of course, Israel has always had a problem of taking advantage of the achievements that it's had militarily politically and diplomatically, and we might see that happen again. Could be that Israel will reach an advantage, maybe even an almost decisive one, then let it slip away. We've seen that kind of thing happen before. Hopefully, Israel will do better this time. Okay, I have a couple of questions. Sunny LaBouffe asks, do you see what happened in Sde Teiman um, as something that will lead to the prescription of Otzma Yehudit in a similar fashion to what happened with Kach? In other words, asking, will they be banned the way Kach was? And the answer to that is no. Otzma Yehudit is too powerful. Israeli society has changed too much. They have too much support. If anyone tried to ban them, it would probably lead to more voters moving to them rather than the other way around. It would delegitimize, to some extent, for good reason, the Supreme Court for getting involved in politics. Now that the Supreme Court is actually doing quite well, I don't think that they'll bring that kind of controversy on itself. I haven't even heard anyone talking about it. And the truth is, this kind of movement that led to that raid on Sde Teiman, it transcends Otzma Yehudit. There was Likud members involved, and the truth is that the cancer that is Kach and Kahanism has spread beyond these parties, and that is a very dangerous thing. So I don't see that happening, and even if it did happen, I don't think it would change all that much, sadly. Mustafa Atala asks, "You seem to be a man of reason." Thank you. I try. What do you think Israel should do with Palestinians? Should they get their state, or do you want to keep them like pre-October 7th, meaning occupation and apartheid? So I'm not going to go into a long debate about this, but I don't think what Israel does qualifies as apartheid, but it does qualify as occupation. And I think the occupation is very harmful, and I'm very much against it. Now, Israel hasn't unilaterally just decided to occupy. There was a war in 1967, blah, blah, blah. It's very hard to reach a deal with the Palestinians. They don't have a unified leadership. There's many people who don't want peace. But on some level, all that's excuses. Israel hasn't done the best that it could to reach a two-state solution, the best that it could to make peace, and I hope that it does. And I think that if Israel did, there would be good results on the other side. And one of my missions in this channel and everything I do is to try to raise awareness for the importance of a two-state solution and why it's the only way forward and the only way that we can make peace. So I hope you agree with that, Mustafa. And I'm always glad to get questions and comments that aren't too hostile from Palestinians and their Arab supporters. Okay, so that's the end of this episode of Israel Explained. If you like what I do here, consider supporting me on Patreon. I also have a podcast called History of the Land of Israel podcast, which I've been neglecting, but that's because I'm here taking care of my father in New York. When I get back to LA, I'll move on that. There's a limit to what I can do right now. And I will see you here again when something exciting happens, which will probably be like any minute now.